Have you ever gone through your clothes and even though you have absolutely no need for anything else, you thought to yourself, let me make some more? Well, something along those lines happened to me recently, and I decided that right now would be a perfect moment to make a very fancy dress. Right now, being the time of sitting at home, being socially distant, and no events happening anytime soon that require me to wear a fancy dress. Anyhow, I was still somehow convinced that this would be the right course of action, and so I chose a tutorial for a dress suitable for an absolute beginner like me. For me, there was really only one option. It would have to be a tutorial by Micarah Tewers, simply because her videos are extremely hilarious and she makes the most beautiful clothes. Micarah makes videos related to sewing, historical fashion, and her pets, among other things. She is honestly one of the funniest people on YouTube, all while making sewing look so easy that she has me fooled into thinking that even I could succeed in making my own dress. If you haven't seen any of her videos, I suggest that you stop watching this video to watch one or, all of her videos before you watch this any further. So the dress I chose is this one that is featured in Micarah's video on how to make a prom dress. I was attracted to this video not because of the words prom dress, but more so because of the words for beginners, because, well, I finished high school about 5 years ago, so let's forget about the words prom dress for now, and focus on the fact that this is a really beautiful dress, and, of course, on the just as important fact that it's suitable for beginners. Now, a little bit about my background in making my own clothes. I have almost no experience. I once made a skirt and a top many, many years ago, all with the help of my mother, who was an expert. Since then, I haven't really made anything, nor have I used a sewing machine in all those years. So anyway, hereby I would like to present to you the very old, very dusty, very retro yet very electronic Singer 4671. This beautiful old dusty machine recently found its way into my life and nothing has been quite the same ever since. Obviously, I was a little doubtful as to whether or not it would still actually work after having gathered dust for such a long time. But luckily, all was well and I had high hopes for my first piece of trial fabric. Until... so the needle broke straight away. Not just once, too. Twice. Sewing machines make everything look really easy, and for the most part, they are really great, until they're not. I don't know what it is, but sometimes they just decide for no reason at all to turn against you, and without so much as a reason why, they will ruin your fabric and also your day for that matter. My point being, don't be too overconfident around your sewing machine because they will know. They will just stop working properly to show you who's in power. Because of this terrible and unforeseen disaster, all of my confidence disappeared at once, and I was already picturing that this would become a very different video altogether. I mean, I would simply have to spend the next couple of weeks non-stop hand sewing the dress, wouldn't I? Let's just say that I was probably very lucky that that didn't end up happening, because I don't know if I would have come out of that situation with my sanity intact. So I consulted a sewing machine expert who solved all my problems, and I could finally start making the dress. Based on the advice of Micarah, I started by making one of the front pieces of the dress out of an old t-shirt, just to get a general idea of what I was supposed to be doing here. I then unpacked the real fabric that I would be using to make the dress, this really bright blue satin kind of fabric. And as you can see here, at the time I was ordering, I must have expected to screw up multiple times, so I ordered about 3 meters of fabric, just in case, which looking back was sort of an unnecessarily large amount. But I don't know, I guess I can make a matching blue satin handbag and blue satin socks with the leftover fabric. Anyway, I made the 4 front pieces and sewed them together 2 by 2, except for one side, so I could still flip them inside out. I really struggled with the next step where I was supposed to make these 2 darts, as Micarah calls them. I had no idea where exactly these folds should go, so I just tried to do something similar as Micarah and hoped for the best. Micarah sometimes isn't really specific when it comes to measurements, but for the back panel, I thought her way of using a short phone charging cable was incredibly ingenious, and it turned out to be the perfect size for me as well. I pinned and sewed together the front pieces to the back panel, and I really should have also hemmed the bottom of the back panel, but I didn't really see any way to do that after I sewed the front pieces to it, and now I just accept it as contributing to that truly homemade look. I cut out 2 long strips of fabric for the outside of the front pieces to make it into a wrap shirt, and 2 strips of fabric that would become the straps of the dress. Cutting them out was fine. Sewing them together was... well, it was late and I sewed the wrong sides together so that the shiny side of the fabric would be on the inside after I would turn it inside out, so I decided to call it a day and return to it the next morning. The next morning I sewed the right sides together, but then came the much dreaded process of turning the straps inside out. Micarah, as any well-prepared and good seamstress, used a loop turner, but, well, I'm not a good seamstress, nor was I well-prepared, and I also didn't have a safety pin, which is also a way to do this, so I ended up using a chopstick. I mean, it took a while and I messed up a few times, but in the end, all my straps were turned inside out. I sewed the longer straps to the outside of the front pieces and pinned the smaller straps to the back panel, and then tried it on to see what length exactly the straps should go. After I figured that out, I sewed everything together, and the first part of the dress was officially done. I then started on the skirt of the dress, using my newfound skill of approximating measurements. I think I measured from my waist to the ground and added a couple of centimeters to it, and for the top I measured my waist and also added some centimeters. I repeated this step for the back skirt panel, which I then cut in half. In Micarah's design, there are pockets in the dress, and as much as I love pockets in a dress, I decided to skip this step to make it a little easier. I sewed together the front skirt panel with the two halves of the back skirt panel, and sewed the two halves together, leaving the upper part open. When I tried it on, it was way too big around my waist, so I had to improvise and make some folds all around the waist that would make it a bit smaller. The next step was to make the waistband of the skirt and sew it in place. This, of course, also went wrong in various ways and multiple times, but in the end it looked quite good and it was starting to resemble a real skirt. I hemmed up the part in the back that was still open and finished off the bottom of the dress by making a rolled hem, which means folding it under twice, and I have to say, that looked really nice. Micarah doesn't exactly say which kind of hook and eye closures she uses or how she sews them to the back of the dress. She just mentions that she does. And I should probably know more about sewing hook and eye closures even as a beginner, but unfortunately I didn't, and that's what made this process extremely frustrating, especially as this is such an important part of the dress. I mean, you don't want to go to a fancy party wearing a fancy dress and then only the next day finding out that everyone was able to see your underwear. I will spare you the details of how I eventually secured the hook and eye closures to the dress, but let's just say that the back of the dress is not my pride and joy. I know that no part of this dress is professional, but the back of the skirt really is the epitome of unprofessionalism. And now, as in true Micarah fashion, let's move on to the grand reveal. So here is the final product of my attempt at following Micarah Tewers' prom dress tutorial. It's blue, it's shiny, and when you look at it from a distance, not knowing how it's supposed to look, it's not half bad. When you take a closer look or compare it to Micarah's execution of the design, you might notice that it's not exactly the same and that there's some imperfections here and there. The skirt is a little too long, the straps are a little loose and a bit uneven, here and there are some things that just look bad, and I've already enlightened you about the back of the skirt. I also don't have an iron, so it doesn't look as crisp as it maybe could. However, I'm still kind of astonished at the fact that I made something that at least resembles a dress. Following a Micarah Tewers tutorial and making this dress was amazing, even though it wasn't always clear which measurements she used or how exactly she did certain steps. So I think even though it is a tutorial for beginners, it's still kind of nice if you're familiar with the basics of sewing or at least know how to use a sewing machine. This whole process was really fun and I've learned a lot from all the mistakes I made, and I would certainly like to try and make another dress or a different piece of clothing sometime to improve my sewing skills. For now, I'm just going to enjoy the fact that I managed to make my own dress, and I really hope that you enjoyed watching this video and that you'll join me in the next one.